right, good morning, everyone. This morning it is July 7th. It's the meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. And we, first of all, call the meeting to order. And I wanted to say welcome to everybody that's here. We're a little bit positioned differently, but anyway, and joining us today we have the Office of the Auditor General, and we have Darren Noonan, who is our first, it's our first visit with Darren here with the Public Accounts Standing Committee. We've got Sherry Griffin, we've got Jerry Russell, and Jennifer Bonus. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today. As per usual, we always start out our meetings with our mandate and our statement of purpose and value, so I'll read that out. Our mandate: the Standing Committee on Public Accounts is charged with matters concerning the public accounts of the province, the annual report of the Auditor General, and fiscal management. Our statement of purpose and values: the Standing Committee on Public Accounts is dedicated in improving public administration in partnership with the Auditor General. The committee examines the administration of government policy, not the merits of it. The committee strives to achieve consensus in its decisions whenever possible. Members take a non-partisan approach to the work of the committee. So welcome to all the committee members here today, and I would ask for an adoption of the agenda. Okay, I'll take Rob. And without further ado, we'll just jump right into the reviewing of the Auditor General Report of 2020, and I'm happy to go through this. I know that this was the final report of our former Auditor General, Jane McAdam, and it was published in March of 2020, and so I will hand it over to you guys and let's just take it away.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Well, my name's Darren Noonan. I'm the new Auditor General for the province. Really looking forward to my term and working with you people to try to make things a little bit better if we can. With me today, you did introduce the people, but I'll just tell you what the role is within the office. Right. So Sherry Griffin is our Director of Performance Audit. Jennifer Bonus is our Senior Audit Manager in Performance Audit. And Jerry Russell is our Senior Director within the office. She plays both financial and performance audit role. So maybe before I get into the first topic area, just to kind of lay out maybe the way I see the next couple of sessions going. So today I thought we would do laboratory services and accessibility program. Then tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but next week, I would do the financial audit and the IT performance audit, and then the third day we would do the follow-up, if that kind of fits within the time frame.
Okay.
And maybe just to bring you a little bit up to date on what we're doing currently in the office before we get started is we obviously we have the special project that the Executive Council has requested on COVID. So sometime within our visits here, we'll be able to provide you with some level of scope of what we're going to do.
Okay.
We're still in the preliminary planning stages of that, but we hope to be able to give you some idea of kind of the direction we're going to go. We have a special performance audit on governance, which we're looking at kind of the board's roles in different Crown corporations and their effectiveness of governance and their ability to govern. The other one is international studies, which we're really at the stage now where we can commence work on that one. And because of the special request for the COVID, we have deferred two other audits that we had planned to do this year. One was on provincial lands, and the other one was on property tax arrears. So they'll still stay on our agenda for future years, but with the staff requirements for the COVID project, we just won't have time to do those. And the other thing that you did request was an update on follow-up from the 2018 performance audits. We haven't had a chance to really do any of that follow-up work yet, but we can talk about the scope and objectives of the work that we did. Typically, the follow-up for those don't get completed until later in the fall.
Okay.
So the first,
Sid?
Thank you. Darren, can you say that again? So you had provincial lands on your agenda and property tax arrears on your agenda for this year, and that's being deferred. And sorry, I just missed, did you have anything that it's still on the agenda for this year on top of the COVID response audit?
international studies
Sorry, yeah.
and corporate governance.
And those two are still on schedule?
They're still, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, thank you.
And I'm just gonna, just for housekeeping, yell at me, like shit, because my back is completely tore. Thank you for doing that, and thanks for reminding me. Just
Okay.
don't those-
So with laboratory services, I'll do the presentation, and then as the questions come through, as you indicated earlier, this was Jane McAdams' report, so I don't know it is in much detail as obviously she would or my directors do, so I'll probably defer most of the questions to them.
Of course.
And I think Jennifer specifically did the majority of the work on the laboratory, so.
Okay, and I will just ask the committee, do you guys want to pause at each recommendation as we go through? Yeah, okay. So we'll do that, Darren. At each recommendation, we'll take a round of questions if anybody has any.
Okay, sure. Okay, first slide. So over 15,000 surgical pathology reports are issued each year in PEI, and the ability to provide patients with the best possible treatment for a wide variety of diseases rests on a foundation of high-quality diagnostics. It is important that Health PEI Laboratory Services has effective processes for the timely analysis of surgical specimens. This impacts the timely and accurate diagnosis of medical conditions so that any necessary treatments can be initiated. Health PEI is the Crown Corporation responsible to deliver publicly funded health services in Prince Edward Island. Laboratory services perform specialized tests to help diagnose, monitor, and guide treatment of diseases and other medical conditions. Laboratory services falls under the Medical Affairs and Legal Services Division, as well as the Hospital Services East, Emergency Health Services, and Long-Term Care Division of Health PEI, which is managed by two separate directors. Laboratory Services provides varying levels of services at each of the 6 provincial hospital facilities. Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the Prince County Hospital are the only 2 island hospitals with anatomical pathology sections within their respective laboratories. Anatomic pathology is the branch of laboratory medicine that is concerned with diagnosis of diseases based on gross, microscopic, chemical, and immunologic examination of organs and tissues, including autopsies. Lots of technical terms in here. So laboratory services has specific procedures for processing surgical specimens. The exhibit on the screen depicts the surgical pathology testing cycle. Following removal of tissue from the patient, the histology section of the laboratory prepares these tissues into microscopic slides for interpretation by a pathologist or other medical personnel. By definition, surgical pathology is the examination of body tissue from incisional or excisional biopsies to diagnose disease. So our audit objective was to assess whether laboratory services has effective processes to analyze surgical specimens efficiently. Generally speaking, anatomic pathology encompasses cytopathology, surgical pathology, and autopsy pathology. This audit focused on surgical pathology only, and as such, autopsy pathology and cytopathology were not included in the scope of our audit. Further, we did not audit whether the appropriate diagnosis by pathologists was made in each of the surgical specimens examined. So our conclusion, overall we concluded that laboratory services has effective processes to analyze surgical specimens efficiently. However, we noted some weaknesses in some areas. So standard operating procedures, responsibility was assigned for performing and reporting analysis of surgical specimens. However, there was no documentation to support that standard operating procedures were regularly reviewed, updated, or provided to Queen Elizabeth Hospital histology lab staff. So Queen Elizabeth Hospital management was not using the document server that houses policies and procedures for histology lab processes. Some standard operating procedures were on the server. However, multiple policies were not reviewed and updated as recommended every 2 years. We also noted standard operating procedures for some processes were missing, and management was unable to provide system-generated communications from server supporting standard operating procedures were being reviewed and renewed as necessary. Regularly reviewing standard operating procedures is important to help ensure staff stay up to date with industry best practice, and updated procedures should be documented and made available to histology lab staff to ensure consistent application in the processing of surgical specimens. Anatomic pathology turnaround time policy. So staff were not aware of a provincial turnaround time policy that had been established in 2009.
Darren, can I just stop you for a second? So there was 2 recommendations there. I'm going to read them out into the record. It's recommendation 4.24, management of the histology lab should ensure all standard operating procedures are regularly reviewed, documented, and available on the Omni Assistant document server. And recommendation 4.25, management of the histology labs should ensure histology lab staff are informed and required to review and sign off on changes of standard operating procedures. Any questions? No? I do have a question, Darren. Omni Assistant document server, is that something that is used in both hospitals?
Jennifer Bonus, I'll answer that,
Thank you.
Michelle. Yes, it is used in both hospitals.
Okay. And to your knowledge, so it needs to be reviewed, documented, and available on, are they not available on this server? So my question, I guess, would be being able to review from different hospitals, right? Do they have access to the same infrastructure?
Well, I guess, Michelle, like each lab has different processes, so they'd have, because they're able to do different types of testing. So we specifically noted that the QEH histology lab didn't have their all of their standard operating procedures on Omni, so it wouldn't necessarily affect Prince County Hospital. Mind you, Laboratory Services uses this Omni Assistant server for all of its, like everything in Laboratory Services, not just surgical pathology, so other policies and procedures would have been on there.
Okay, thank you. And Prince County uses it, but their records were all up to date, is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it was just QEH?
QEH.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you. Okay, go ahead, thanks.
So staff, with the turnaround time policy, staff were not aware of a provincial turnaround time policy that had been established in 2009. Both directors, some pathologists, as well as histology lab management were unaware of the turnaround time policy for surgical specimens that was established in 2009. The policy was not available on the lab services internal document server for use or viewing. It was located by management after the completion of our audit fieldwork. Ensuring medical staff are informed of turnaround time policies and keeping policies up to date promote effective and efficient processing of surgical specimens. Turnaround times may impact the timing of treatment and other therapeutic decisions for patients. What's that?
Are we at the recommendations? Okay, thank you. So we have one recommendation in this section, it's 4.35. Management of laboratory services should update the turnaround time policy for surgical specimen processing to reflect current standard operating procedures and include details of a process for monitoring turnaround times. This policy should be issued and distributed to relevant staff. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Histology laboratory personnel. Histology labs at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and Prince County Hospital are staffed with qualified personnel, including medical laboratory technologists and medical laboratory assistants. There are no guidelines developed for continuous professional development for histology lab staff. There is no documentation maintained on any professional development completed. We were informed that continuous professional development of histology lab staff was not a requirement for their employment. Technologists and assistants are not regulated in the province of Prince Edward Island like in most provinces across the country. PEI is one of two provinces, the other being British Columbia, without regulated laboratory technologists and medical lab assistants. There are no annual professional development requirements in place for technologists or medical laboratory assistants in Prince Edward Island. Continuing professional development is not currently mandatory for technologists and assistants and is not tracked by management or staff. We were informed that staff can and do apply for paid leave and funding for training and education programs. In addition, they do have access to an online portal that provides learning resources applicable to their positions. In other regulated provinces such as Ontario, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland, technologists and assistants require a minimum of 10 hours of continuous professional development annually.
Okay, so recommendation for .42, management of the histology lab should develop continuous professional development guidelines and maintain records of training completed by staff, lab staff. Sid?
Thank you, Chair. Is this a standard across the board with most of similar health professions that would be in health PEI? Like with the 10 hours?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the 10 hours was, we took that from other provinces, from medical lab technologists. So I think your question is outside the scope of what we looked at for our audit.
Like, I think for a lot of professional bodies, there is a requirement for continuous professional development. So I don't know the specifics to other professions within health PEI, but I would suspect that there is.
Sid? Good. Anybody else have a question? So I just have a quick question. To your knowledge, is this fully staffed? Like, or do they have issues obtaining staff?
During the scope period of our audit, they were fully staffed. I think prior to our audit scope period, there were issues. I think there were a lot of maternity leaves and that kind of thing that they had trouble staffing the lab, but during the scope period of our audit, they were fully staffed.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And how many staff members are there?
If we go back, just 1 second, we have a organizational chart on page.
Oh, yes, right.
So on page 42 of the report, Exhibit 4.3. So it provides a breakdown per hospital, so QEH and PCH, and what staff are within each surgical pathology section. So obviously the PCH is a smaller staffing because they have less specimens that they test there.
So under PCH, is it the 3 positions that you're suggesting that there be training set out for?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Also the histology assistants as well. So there's also
Okay.
2.
Okay, thank you.
So on page 57 in the report, Appendix A, under management's response, so it does, some action is being taken in that area. So the medical laboratory technologists will shortly become regulated under the Regulated Health Professionals Act. And the college will determine the continuing education credits required from professionals. The timeline for the changes to the act, they're pending, so I'm not sure when those are going to come into effect, but it looks like they're at least considering them.
Thank you.
Tracking. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital and Prince County Hospital histology labs track surgical specimens from receipt through to processing and reporting. Queen Elizabeth Hospital Lab Services uses a tracking system called Cerebro. Cerebro provides detailed tracking for each specimen being processed. Through the use of Cerebro, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Histology Lab identifies bottlenecks in the processing phases of surgical specimens prior to pathologists' analysis and reporting. Prince County Hospital uses a barcoding tracking system for surgical specimens being processed for pathologists' reporting. We were informed by management that they intend to roll out a new island-wide electronic medical record system in the upcoming fiscal year, which would allow for patient health records at physicians' offices and Health PEI's electronic health record to be digitally connected. Thus, reports would be accessed digitally.
Okay. All right, so that's recommendation 4.55. Management of laboratory services should implement a process for the efficient delivery of pathology reports to requisitioning physicians and/or nurse practitioners. Any questions? Okay, thank you. You can keep going.
So to speak to that, on page 58,
Yeah.
under management's response, a request for proposal for the electronic medical record system was supposed to go out February 11th, and then close on March 11th. So I'm not sure what happened with COVID coming in play with that. So I'm expecting it's been delayed, but I might be incorrect in saying that. Quality assurance. Laboratory Services maintains a quality assurance process for surgical specimens through quality checks within the histology labs and quality assurance by pathologists on new cancer cases, difficult cases, and a selection of completed cases. Pathologists perform various quality assurance checks on specimen analysis for such things as complicated cases and first-time cancer diagnosis. Laboratory Services also has various quality assurance committees for the histology labs as well as pathology, where quality control issues are discussed and addressed. Further, annual reporting is provided to senior management of Health PEI on quality-related issues within histology and pathology. So in total, 6 recommendations were made to Laboratory Services. Appendix A within the report lists the recommendations and management's response to our recommendations. And we will follow up on those recommendations in the 2023 annual report.
Okay, and the final recommendation is 4.65. In accordance with existing policies, management of the histology labs should ensure internal maintenance on laboratory equipment is completed and documented. Any questions on that? Gord?
In 4.55, I see that there's a medical record steering committee at the last of our committees. Is there any chance we could look at getting an update on that versus, how COVID might have affected them, like we said, and see when that, what they've been doing lately and how delayed that process potentially might be?
Yes, sure. And I noted to maybe ask Ryan to check on that RFP if the committee's okay with that.
Yeah.
And maybe get Ryan or the clerk to let us know where that RFP currently stands. And if I think it was supposed to close on March 11th. do you see on recommendation 4.55 on page 58, the management's response, they were issuing an RFP to be released on February 11th and would close on March 11th. 58. Did I say 52? Yeah. Is committee okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Gord, did you have any other questions?
No, that's it for now, Chair.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so if we quickly go back through the 6 recommendations, the timelines in the management response, so recommendation 4.24 was a timeline for completion of April 2020. Recommendation 4.25, the timeline for completion was February 1st to April 30th of 2020. Recommendation 4.35 was March 31st, 2020. It looks like 4.42 requires changes to the Act. And then the next one is pending the RFP. And the final one, the 6th recommendation, 4.65, is to be completed. So what would be the committee's decision on next steps for this? Carla?
It seems as though, other than the one that requires changes to the Act, that they should be completed. So I wonder if it would be worth asking for just a written update on how things are and if those are indeed implemented.
Sure. So an action plan with progress?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody in favor of that? Okay, so we'll send them out a letter asking for an update on their progress with an action plan. Is there anything else that you would want us to know about this audit, or does the summary pretty much sum it up? Yeah? Okay. All right, is everybody ready to move on? Great. So the next chapter we're going to go to is Chapter 2, which is on Accessibility Supports Program. And that starts on page 3. And I'm just going to make one quick change if everybody's okay with that. If we wait, would everybody be okay to wait until we actually get to Appendix A, and then we'll have the management responses at the same time as going through the recommendations? And then we could just open up to the committee if you have questions as we're going through, or clarification questions, then we can just ask them as we go. It's okay. All right, so I'm going to just change that a little bit. So we'll wait till you get through it, unless anybody's got pressing questions, and then they can just call me, and then we'll review the recommendations in Appendix A.
Okay. So the Accessibility Supports Program provides financial and non-funded supports for Islanders living with disabilities. Program benefits total approximately $17 million in 2018-2019. And as of June 30th, 2019, there were approximately 1,700 Islanders enrolled in the Accessibility Supports Program. The Accessibility Support Program was implemented in July of 2018. Prior to the implementation of the AAS program, disability-related assistance was offered through the Disability Support Program and the Social Assistance Program. Supports offered depend on the individual's strengths and needs. Strengths and needs are identified through a capability assessment as well as income and asset assessments. Assured income benefits are provided for individuals with disabilities who require financial support for basic needs. Disability-related supports available up to a maximum of $3,100 per month. Personal supports to help with personal daily living assistance. Housing supports to help with independent living. community supports to help increase active participation within the community. Caregiver supports helps family members of caregivers. Non-funded supports helps connect individuals with supports which do not require monetary funding. Assured income helps with basic living expenses, and these supports are to replace financial assistance payments previously received under the social assistance program. At the time of our audit, Rehabilitation of Disabled Persons Act, Social Assistance Act and regulations, and accessibility supports policies were the legislation and policies in effect. Draft supports for Persons with Disabilities Act and regulations. The Rehabilitation of Disabled Persons Act was in place during our audit and is still in force. It gives the Minister of Social Development and Housing authority to provide such goods and services considered necessary for the rehabilitation of disabled persons. The Social Assistance Act and regulations provides financial assistance for people in need. Rates of assistance paid under this Act are required to be approved by Executive Council. The assured income component of the AAS program grants financial support to eligible applicants for basic needs such as food and shelter. This funding is provided for under the Social Assistance Act and regulations. The AAS support policies were drafted and implemented to guide staff on how to administer the Enhanced Accessibility Supports Program. The Supports for Persons with Disabilities Act received royal assent on November 28, 2019, and is yet to be proclaimed. The regulations were being drafted at the time of our audit. The Support for Persons with Disabilities Act and regulations aims to bring two portions of the program, disability-related supports and assured income, into one piece of legislation. So our audit objectives were to determine whether the Department of Social Development and Housing authorizes and provides AAS supports in accordance with legislation and policies, and whether there was a clear, accessible process to receive and respond to AAS program inquiries on a timely basis. So overall, we concluded authorization was obtained from Executive Council to implement the AAS program, but key components were not in place. The department did not always authorize and provide AAS supports in accordance with legislation and policies. Information on the program is reasonably accessible. However, a process needs to be developed to log, monitor, and respond to inquiries. The program was implemented on July 16, 2018. However, program policies were not approved until March 2019. The financial assessment policy was implemented December 2018, but not approved until March 2019. So the AAS program policies were implemented on July 16, 2018, the effective date of the new program. However, the policies were not formally approved until March 2019, which was 9 months after the program was implemented. The Integration System Management, ISM, is an electronic system used for case management for various provincial programs, including the Social Assistance Program and the AAS program. Payments are initiated and supported within ISM. As at the time of our audit, ISM had not been updated to support the AAS program. This resulted in manual adjustments to financial support rate changes and client contribution calculations. 18 months into the program, some individuals were not assessed using the new capability assessment tool, meaning there's a risk that eligible supports may not have been identified for Islanders.
Question, Carla?
I think it was like 2 slides back. My processing time's a little slow. Yeah, so the program was implemented July 16th, 2018. So they were operating for quite a while before program policies were approved. So were they just operating on the policies as they were? Did they have it policies at all? They just weren't approved, or?
Sherry Griffin, can you hear me? They did have draft policies in place from the beginning, which they used for the program delivery, but they weren't formally approved until March 2019.
And please let me
Carla?
know. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay, I can't.
Please let me know if this is outside of the scope. I'm just wondering, do you know if there were great changes to those policies?
In some cases, yes, but I mean, as far as program delivery, it depended on if new services were provided. The new policy would have had been developed for that. If between the old program and the new program, there wasn't much of a change in the service that they were providing to like applicants, there wouldn't have been much of a change. So it really varied depending on the topic and the policy.
Carla?
Again, let me know if this is outside the scope. I'm wondering if there was a huge discrepancy in services delivered at that time. Once policies were put in place, was it kind of noticed, whoa, there, overpayments or under delivery or anything like that?
Sherry?
Do you mean when the policies were eventually approved?
Yes.
I don't believe so, because they had been in draft for months before that, and for the most part had been used up to that point. They just weren't formally approved until March. Yeah, so I don't think there would have been much of a transition at that time for most policies.
Carla? Okay, Gord?
You had mentioned, talking about the intake, where there might be some gaps in logging, monitoring, and responding to various clients coming in. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
It does come up a little bit later within the slides, if you want to wait till then.
Any other questions, Gord?
No, that's good.
No? Carla?
I'm back to that slide there. There was also a bit of a gap in the financial assessment policy. So kind of same question. Did you notice any huge discrepancies in services or payments once those policies were finalized?
Sherry Griffin again. Yeah, we do talk about that a little bit later, if that's...
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I just have a quick question on this one. Do you know, when you went through your audit, was there a reason given for why the draft policies were in place for so long?
I believe it was just they were using them, and there was like staff changes, and just those things take time. No concrete answer to
Okay.
why it took so long.
All right, thank you.
Documentation and authorization. Collaborative support plans were not always completed, monitored, and updated. So the collaborative support plan is an individualized plan that documents how supports can be provided to the individual. The collaborative support plan is similar to a case plan where the AAS coordinator and the individual living with a disability meet on a yearly basis or earlier if there are significant changes to the individual's circumstances. The plan is utilized to document areas of support and need, strategies for addressing the needs, expected outcomes as a result of supports, and responsibilities of both parties, and financial and unfunded supports. We reviewed 30 applicant files and found that 27% of files reviewed, the collaborative support plan was not fully complete. In 2 instances, the plan was not signed. In 6 instances, there was no evidence on file to indicate it was completed. In 1 instance, a support needs assessment was also not completed. The form used to gather information on the individual and determine how they would benefit from the program. When collaborative support plans are not complete, it makes it difficult for the department to monitor changes in individual circumstances and identify required changes for program supports, ensuring that the individual's needs are being met. In the collaborative support plans, there is a chart that indicates the areas of support and the funding amount. We noted in 32% of the collaborative support plans completed, the area of support was indicated. However, the strategy and/or funding amount was noted as to be determined. These notes were not updated in the plan during our scope period, and the majority of the cases did not provide funding or document follow-up action had been taken. Collaborative support plans are important to document the needs of individuals and how, within the parameters of the program, these needs are being met. When these are not monitored or updated for outstanding supports, there is a risk that individuals are not receiving the supports they require in accordance with the program.
Okay, Carla?
So I'm just kind of thinking of a collaborative support plan a little bit like an individual education plan to ensure that individual needs are being met and where there's a gap, it's being addressed. So I'm wondering if during your time there, I find it really hard to know if I'm in the scope, I'm sorry. But during your time there, was it a complete, like was it a good complement of staff? Or I'm just trying to wrap my head around if this was kind of the gap in the policy where this would fall, or if this was maybe a staff, not enough staff.
We didn't look at like a staffing complement so much, so I can't really answer to that. I think it was quite a change for the staff. Like these plans were much more comprehensive than they had been previously. Again, sorry, you're speaking about the collaborative support plan?
Yeah, the collaborative support plan.
Yes, so I think, I'm not sure if we touched on that in the slide, so there was like 3 individuals who completed those collaborative support plans. They were all new to the program, like when the program changed. So there was like a social worker, 2 social workers and an occupational therapist, who were the only ones that completed those detailed collaborative support plans. So there would have, we didn't look at this in detail, but I would assume there would have been a bit of a time lag in getting those done because there wasn't many people who completed that. Does that answer your question?
Carla?
And would they have been all kind of in a central location, those 3 people completing?
I'm not sure if they were all in Charlottetown or not. I believe some of them were, but I'm not sure where the other ones, like if they're all located there, so.
Carla?
Thank you, Chair.
Gord?
So the collaborative support plan, the ones that you saw that were completed, how long between the successful applicants completing the thing and the time that they received funding?
Sherry?
I don't know the answer to that right off. I believe we would have it in the file, but I think there normally was a quick turnaround on that. I don't have an exact amount of time, but.
So then it must, when you see a TBD, to be determined, the client has successfully, their intake was successful, they were in the program. The thing that's holding them up is the to be determined note. So my question, I guess, is how long do those clients, if they have a TBD on there?
So I guess in that case with the TBD, like that would have been like one specific service they were getting. There could have been like, I don't know, like multiple services they were getting, and there was, it wouldn't have been TBD for like the whole plan. It would have just been like one aspect of it. So maybe like a certain care or a certain service they were going to be obtaining that they didn't have all the details worked out for at the time that the plan was finished, but the other components of the plan would have been in place.
Okay, yeah, that's one of my questions is that, did that stop everything?
No,
But
it doesn't stop everything, no.
27%, that number seems very high when you're looking at the 30 files and 27% of them were not fully completed. Was that kind of an eye-opener for you guys looking into this?
Yeah, I think so. We definitely thought it was an issue.
Gord?
I'm good, thanks, Chair.
Any other questions? So, question for myself. The collaborative support plan, so there were 1,700 clients in total of the accessibility program, is that correct? So when this was implemented in 2018, did all of those clients have to go through the collaborative support program in order to enter into accessibility?
So they would have been, I'll say, transferred as far as, like, they still would receive their benefits, but when it came time, like, anyone new coming into the program after that date would be assessed under the new assessment tool and the new collaborative support plan. That's what they would go through to get into the program. And as the people who existed in the program, like the old disability support program, as their annual case reviews were required to come up, they would be assessed under the new assessment tool. So it was like a process that happened over the period.
Okay, and for the 30 clients that you measured in the sampling that you took, was that of new clients entering in, or could there have been some older ones moving over?
There was both, for sure.
There was both?
I'm not sure if I have the number right off.
Okay.
We took it at a certain date, like, yeah, there was definitely some new ones and old, and ones that had transferred in from the old program, so.
Okay.
I'm not sure I have the exact number, the breakdown with me of that.
Is that something, Sherry, that you could send back to us
Sure,
to let
I
us
can
know?
send it,
Was there a timeline in which any of the initial clients had to be transferred over by? Was there a time frame there?
I don't believe there was a set time frame, but they're all required to have their annual review done, like
Okay.
at least annually, obviously, and so they would be required to have the new assessment tool completed.
Okay.
And I should say too, it's not necessarily just their annual review. If anything major changed in their situation that resulted in like a new needs or less needs or a big change, that would in most cases prompt like a new assessment being required. So
Okay.
it varies very much based on the
Okay.
situations.
And I might be digging a little too deep, but of the 30 cases, had they all come up for an annual review prior to you assessing, prior to this audit?
Yeah, no, I again don't have the exact breakdown, but some of them, especially with the new clients,
Yeah.
by the end of our scope, they wouldn't have been in the program a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, but do you want, is that another thing?
Well, I'm just assuming that anybody who was new, that's the first thing that you go through is,
Yeah.
so they should have one immediately. And then my concern would be is of the existing clients that had moved over from the disability supports program, how long did it take for this collaborative support plan to be completed? And if that is part of the 27, why the 27% so high?
Oh, yeah, no, all of the ones in our sample were like they were, like, I'll say transferred, I don't know if that's the
Okay.
right term to use, but
Okay.
they were like, should have had
Should
one
have had it.
completed, or at least the process was started.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
Any more questions? No? Rob?
Just a little more, sorry, oh, okay, just a little more handle. So the client that requires some supports goes through a plan, gets the collaborative support plan put in place, and that assigns then usually supports for funding to that individual to deal with that particular plan. What happens if there's a disagreement between the individual or their caregiver or family? Is there any appeal process to have a second look at it, or that's fair and objective? Because usually you're dealing with people that have some form of disabilities. They usually aren't great advocates for themselves, things of that nature. So I'm just wondering is there an appeal process? And maybe it's not part of the scope.
Sorry, we didn't look at the appeal process. Yeah, I believe there is not like a formal appeal process, but I think they can try to escalate it a little bit. I believe they were working on that or talking about it, but I don't want to say for sure. We definitely wasn't part of the audit, but I believe there was discussions about implementing something formal with that.
Rob?
I mean, maybe it's an unfair question to ask, but do you feel that there should be an appeal process just because of the clientele you tend to be dealing with and these types of issues?
I know that other social programs do have a formal appeal process, like social assistance. When we did that, they had a formal appeal board. So
Rob?
So basically, we're saying that that would be a potential recommendation, may not be part of the Auditor General's recommendation, but something to take note of, I guess.
And I think, Robert, that, to go back to Gordon's question on the 27% not completed, for the department to handle that appeal process properly, they should make sure that that assessment has been done thoroughly and completely.
Okay. You're good, Rob? Sid?
No, good.
Oh, you know, okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We can continue.
Documentation was not always maintained to demonstrate that non-funded supports were considered. These supports including referrals to free budgeting services, community events, and activities and access to community connectors. We expected to see indication that non-funded supports were being considered and provided to individuals, as that was part of the program enhancement. In the 30 files we reviewed, we could not see documentation of non-funded supports being considered in 60% of instances. In 3 of these files, documentation indicated that non-funded supports should be considered, but in these cases we found no evidence that supports were provided to the individual. There was also no documentation to indicate why the non-funded supports were not provided. In all collaborative support plans reviewed, there was no indication that non-funded supports were provided. It is important for the department to consider and document non-funded supports. When the file does not document this, there is a risk that eligible supports may not be offered and that coordinators do not have all of the information required to best serve individuals living with disabilities.
Carla?
I find this, well, a lot of it is very concerning. This one in particular, as you consider loneliness, which we had talked about. And this kind of reminds me, in a strange way, of social prescriptions, where, except it's not even costing us anything, but just connecting individuals to services. And since getting into this role, that's where I find the hugest gap for people who are already in programs even, to know where to access services. And so I know I've spoken to many colleagues and they agreed that we spend a lot of our time navigating services for people who are either not able to do it themselves, not able to advocate for themselves, or they just don't know where to go. And so this is a really good example of a place where that should be happening. And so was there any reason given why this wasn't being done? And I would also kind of look at this as like, it's not, but you know, if you're kind of giving out money, that's what people need. That's like the immediate need. And these non-funded supports are kind of like the gravy. And so if you're kind of, you know, giving out the money, is it, again, I'm kind of going back to, is it the number of staff? But was there a reason given for why those were left out?
I think a lot of it had to do with what you said, like the money. That part's always was generally documented. I think with the change in the program, we were told there is going to be a much more like focus on documenting the non-funded, that they weren't always documented in the past, and with the changes, it just hadn't. Maybe training, maybe just that it needs to be emphasized that those things need to be written down and documented. But there was definitely the acknowledgement that they knew it needed to be improved, the documentation of it. But.
Carla?
This is more of a comment at this point, but I find the more of these meetings I sit in, the more I grow concerned of our systems are spread thin, and these important things are kind of falling through the cracks. those are the important things. And, you know, I just thank you for doing this and kind of shining a light on it so we have concrete numbers and examples of where the gaps are. And we all have a responsibility to work on that. So anyway, thank you. I'll leave that there.
Mind, just with the financial aspect, in order for the funding to be generated, it has to be entered into the ISM system. And so that would be another reason why the financial, anything tied to a financial component would have to be entered and documented, or else the money wouldn't be issued. But the non-funded, it's just easier to, you know, maybe has more potential to not be documented. So yeah, but it should be.
Gord?
Just a quick question on that. So if they're non-funded supports going out, how do we document the financial impact of that for the department in the end? You know.
For the non-funded?
Yeah. So.
Well, there's no monetary amounts directly involved. It would be like with community organizations or that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So,
I didn't know if it was that or like supports or some kind of supports for households or. Yeah.
It wouldn't be supports that the department had to pay for. It could be like connecting you with like social activities or that kind of thing. But it's basically anything that no money needs to, the department doesn't have to pay, so there's not.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Carla?
I think I read it somewhere in this section. If someone is on a collaborative support plan, is there a time, like, is there a specific amount of time where they meet with a caseworker on a you know, on a weekly or monthly or whatever basis?
There is, annually they have to meet to like review their support plan and other documentation. I believe, I can't remember the time right off, but I believe it's every 2 years that a collaborative support plan has to be like redone, but it would vary depending on the person's needs. So if they needed more and that was identified, they would meet more regularly. But it's like there's minimums established in policy where, because as you can tell, like there's a lot of varying needs in this population. So some people would be perfectly fine only going in once a year just for financial, but yeah, so it really varies depending on the situation.
Thank you. Corey?
Do you have a number figure on how much support should have been paid out that was never paid out to any of the clients? No.
No. Sorry, could you? No, we looked at the population of the 30 and how much supports like our sample population went, but as far as we didn't identify, like, do you mean like as the whole population of?
Or I guess in this case, the 30.
Yeah, I guess my short answer is no. We didn't, we looked to see that the supports they had in place were being offered and that they were being assessed, but we didn't identify like significant amounts that weren't being paid. Is that it?
Corey?
No, that's-
Any questions? Okay.
Good to move on?
Yes, we are. Thanks,
Okay.
Darren.
In the collaborative support plans, there is a chart that indicates the areas of support and the funding amount. We noted in 32% of the collaborative support plans completed, the area of support was indicated. However, the strategy and/or funding amount was noted as to be determined. These notes were not updated in the plan during our scope period, and the majority of the cases did not provide funding or document follow-up action had been taken. Collaborative support plans are important to document the needs of individuals and how, within the parameters of the program, these needs are being met. When these are not monitored or updated for outstanding supports, there is a risk that individuals are not receiving the supports they require in accordance with the program. Documentation was not always maintained to demonstrate that non-funded supports were considered. These supports, including referrals to free budgeting services, community events and activities, and access to community connectors. Did I already?
It's okay. We'll get. It's a
We did
refresher.
that. Okay. Applicants are required to provide verification of expenses for various supports under the program. We checked whether documentation was obtained to verify payments as required by policy. We found that in 20% of files tested, documentation was not on file to support some payments to individuals. Expenses which were missing documentation included communication expenses, supervision expenses, respite expenses, and personal care supports. Documentation is important to ensure the policy is being adhered to and payments are accurate and supported.
Carla?
I'm just wondering, in section 2.58, it says that community connectors were hired by the department to create a link between the individual and community organizations. Do you know, is that still in place?
It was at the time of our scope. They were hired, yeah. I believe it still is.
Thank you. Okay, we can continue.
As previously noted, the capability assessment assigns a maximum monthly funding level for disability-related supports, which can be provided to an individual. During our review of client files, we noted 2 instances where funded supports provided exceeded the individual's maximum monthly funding level. One instance was over the program maximum funding level of $3,100. In both of these situations, the funding was approved by the AAS program supervisor. There is no authority in the policies for exceptions to the levels to be made. The department should ensure that funded supports are authorized in accordance with program policies.
Rob Henderson?
That's a bit troubling in respect. So what happens when there is an overpayment? Is there any process to recoup that money back, or is it a case where, I mean, my one concern would be is that, you know, you're once again dealing with individuals that may have limited decision-making skills and things of that nature. So if they went and spent that money, it wasn't a mistake that they made, how did we get that money back, and we do it in a compassionate manner?
Sherry?
Actually, in these instances, it wasn't so much of an overpayment. They, based on their collaborative needs assessment, it was based on their needs. It was just over what the policy allows. It was, and what their assessments had indicated that they needed, but it was actually based on needs and approved. It's basically a case of not allowing, the policy doesn't allow for these situations whenever someone's need doesn't fit in the already established amounts. Yeah, it's not a case of overpayment.
Rob?
So is it a case there should be more discrepancy allowed to the supervisors to be able to meet individuals' needs without circumventing any policy?
That's possible. We just ask that the policy addresses that what they do whenever there is an amount that's over like the maximums. It was a case of when we were checking for approval, there wasn't any like documented like approval authority given. It was approved by someone who had a proper signing authority and a supervisor, so, and it was based on their needs, so it was more of a policy issue than a needs.
Yeah.
Rob?
But once again, so I guess some strict policies that allow for that, but also not to allow it to go the other way, where maybe some monies are nefariously set out to the wrong individuals or for the wrong reasons. So I mean, obviously in this case, it looks like it was all done for the right reasons. It just so there needs to be a little more flexibility in the policy there to allow people to have their needs met. Thanks.
Carla?
Just on that, when you were doing your scope your audit, and perhaps it's coming up, was there ever a case of an overpayment that had to be paid back?
Not in our sample.
Okay, thank you.
Gord?
So you're saying 1 in 5 people on the program spent but didn't have the authorization, or didn't submit the proper receipts to receive the funding. And the department's able to go over the $3,100 threshold without authorization. Are these things that they can change in regulations? If you're seeing 1 in 5 and you only have a 30-person sample, that's probably, it's a good chance that the department is overpaying, or they're not monitoring their policies effectively. Would you?
Sherry?
Sorry, with the 20%, yeah, there's definitely a need to, for the workers to get the supports required, like at the time of annual review, like the documentation for the expenses. It's definitely something.
And I think, Gord, the importance of those collaborative plans to make sure everything's documented is it allows the department to assess the program and say, there's needs not being met here, we need to have a look at this. But if it's not documented properly, you're just kind of guessing.
Gord?
And it seems like something you need to get control of to monitor what is going on, what the needs are, and if people are going over on those limits. So, yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Sid?
Thank you, Chair. With the two instances that exceeded the maximum monthly funding level, can you be any more specific on why that? Like, was it one major expense, or was it just because they're pulling from a couple of different areas that it added up?
They were both people with like severe needs. One of them, when the assessment occurred, it basically, they do the assessment and then it generates a number. Like, it doesn't just spit it out, like they use their professional judgment as well. But the number that came from that, like the dollar value, was not necessarily, like, it wouldn't meet their needs based on what everyone knew they needed. So they made the special approval. And in the other instance, the person was like very, like severe disabilities, and the maximum for the program is 3,100, which wasn't going to meet their needs. So it was.
Okay. No, I just wanted
Sid?
to make sure. Thank you, Chair. It's obviously very valid. Just need to find the right parameters so that when those cases do come up, rare as they are, that we can take care of it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And Carla?
Just kind of back to what Gord was asking on the 20% of files tested where the documentation was not on file. Just kind of a process question, but is that the client's responsibility to take in receipts, or is there ever allowance made for, if the person is not cognitively able to kind of manage that? Is it sent directly to caseworkers, or how does that work?
So yeah, the individual would have to, or their caretaker would have to provide the supports. Now, there's kind of dual responsibility. They're required to provide the receipts or invoices, but the workers are also required to look for them if they don't get them. So it kind of goes both ways. It was definitely a dual responsibility. Ultimately, if they're not getting the receipts, the benefits shouldn't be paid. I mean, in some cases that gets really, you're not going to, it's difficult to cut them off. But with communication, for example, like cell phone bills and that kind of thing, that, I mean, they could cut them off, but might be considered severe by some people, but they should be getting their receipts. If they're not getting them, they should be like asking for them. And we did look like to see how many times that was documented that they asked and were looking for these receipts. Sometimes it's better documented than others as far as like the work they're doing to obtain the documentation that they're missing. So that can vary as well.
Carla?
And just one more question. Part of the assessment, do they look at, if a person's not able to care for themselves, do they look at if they have a reliable, consistent caretaker?
I believe that would be part of the overall like care plan, the collaborative supports plan. That would be, because if they're not able to look after themselves, it would require like a lot of personal care. So, do you mean just for like the paperwork aspect or more?
I'm kind of branching out and thinking of it more all in general, but it started with the receipts, you know, because I know that that can be really challenging for people, so.
Thank you.
I think the tough thing, when you come in to do an audit and you're looking at the documentation that's in the file, they may have provided the information to the caseworker, but if they don't take a copy of it or document it in the file, then we have to assume that they didn't.
Right.
Good point.
Okay. Gord, did you have a question?
Oh, no.
Oh, no? Okay, sorry. Okay. I think I got everybody, so
Okay.
we can go ahead.
So financial assistance is provided as part of the AAS program. The financial assistance part of the program is called Assured Income. The financial assistance rates provided under Assured Income are similar to the social assistance program. During our review of files, we found that under the Assured Income program, a community living allowance of $150 was being provided to individuals in lieu of the personal comfort allowance of $91. However, under the Social Assistance Act, the personal comfort allowance rate is to be approved by Executive Council. Therefore, in this instance, the rate paid had not been approved by the required legislation. Assured Income is a major component of the AAS program and is important that rates are appropriately approved.
So, does anybody have any questions on that? I'll just ask a quick question then. Was that in every instance that they were receiving the 150 instead of the 91?
Yes.
Okay. And was there any of the sampling that you looked at approved by Executive Council, or none of them were?
No, it's the rates in general, like it should be like a high-level approval for that rate. It wouldn't be
Okay.
like on an individual basis. So
Okay.
they were approved for like the social assistance program at $91, but under this program, individuals were given the 150 and there hadn't been additional approval for that amount.
And I'm assuming you got a managerial response that we might be talking about, but did they give you any indication why that was?
I don't recall. I believe it was like very well known and agreed to among the managers and the program people. It just had not gone for approval. I'm not sure of the reason, but
Okay.
are we going to go over the recommendations later?
We are.
Okay, maybe
Okay.
I'll just wait and see what their response is.
All right, I'm good. Anybody else? Okay, we can continue.
Okay, so program inquiries. We reviewed the different methods the department used to provide information on the program. While completing our work, we noted the department does not have a process to monitor and respond to program inquiries. Only telephone inquiries are tracked by the department using a manual process. This makes it difficult for management to monitor and review inquiries. 58% of inquiries, in our testing we found that 58% of inquiries tested, a staff member made contact with the individual. 31% of inquiries tested, they attempted and left a voicemail. 4% of inquiries they attempted and noted there was no answer. And 7% of phone calls had no indication of when the individual received a response to their inquiry. It is important that the department has a well-defined process to log and monitor program inquiries. This would include ensuring inquiries are responded to on a timely basis.
Carla?
When I read that, it made sense to me because I hear from a lot of clients who continually try to reach accessibility supports and just don't get anything back. Was there a reason given for this? Is it because there's not one kind of centralized, not that I'm advocating for one centralized place, but do you think it's a kind of a lack of whose responsibility is it, or?
No, they
Sherry?
were dedicated, I believe they were referred to as screeners who would take the call, and they were all based out of Charlottetown, so there was a dedicated group of people who receive and do the initial response to calls. they were implementing some like electronic phone monitoring systems to kind of track inquiries, but, or track telephone calls, I would say, not like necessarily inquiries, like all telephone calls in, but it didn't give any information as far as like if it was an inquiry or just someone calling like a worker or whatever for a different reason. So yeah, they do have a dedicated group that take all the phone calls. Yeah.
Carla?
And so that dedicated group was in place during this?
Thank you. Okay, any questions? We can keep going.
So in total, 13 recommendations were made to the Department of Social Development and Housing. Appendix A includes the list of recommendations and management's response, and we will follow up on those recommendations in the 2023 report.
Okay, and at this point, we'll just go through each of the recommendations and the management's response. So recommendation 2.19, the Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure the Accessibility Advisory Council meets on a regular basis in accordance with its terms of reference. And the management's response, the department will identify regular meeting dates on a go-forward basis and complete this by May 2020. Sorry, can you tell me when this was finalized, like when you received these management responses?
It was, I don't have the exact date, but it would have been early March.
So obviously pre-COVID?
Yes.
Okay, all right, perfect. Any questions on that recommendation?
I might just
Gord?
we have to, I'd just like to make a note because, well, COVID has affected meetings, in-person meetings and stuff, and to figure out how they're going to officially date and record that would be my only question.
Okay.
Chair.
Carla?
I also seem to remember, actually, no, never mind. That's not the place. This is not the place for that comment.
No, it's not. Thank you.
Can you read my thoughts?
Pretty much. Rob?
Just I wrote it down earlier on there, I guess when it talked about that the advisory board never had any meetings, did they say why they didn't have any meetings from that length of period of time?
Although their mandate, I never know if I have to wait a second for that.
I'll just tell you, I kind of watch for the red light. So if
Oh.
the red light hasn't come on, do you see it on your microphone?
Oh,
There's a
yes,
little
there
red
is.
ring.
Okay.
That'll
I
tell you
can't
when
see it
you're,
when it's up.
and that's why I will say your name before,
Okay.
if I see you starting to go. So yes.
Sorry about that. So even though their mandate of the council was clear in that, like the development of the program and like, I forget the exact wording, but maintaining, like, to keep going after the program was developed, I feel like they met a lot, or they met whenever the program was being developed, and then it very much just kind of soldered off after that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Rob?
So was that a ministerial decision or a committee chair decision? Or, I mean, it just seems like a little odd that they wouldn't meet at all. And is that committee still in place, I guess is another question I have, advisory committee.
We tried to find just this week, or if there was any new board members appointed, and we couldn't see that. So although I think most of their terms expired like last year, so, but I don't think, or earlier this year, most of them were May 2020 that their terms expired. I don't believe any new people have been appointed.
So there's just no,
Rob?
so there's no board to meet then, basically.
At this point, during our audit, they were all, it was still within most of their terms were still ongoing. Yeah, so I don't have a real answer. I believe it was just the pressure of developing the program was over and it just kind of faded away, but I could be
Rob?
wrong.
So maybe from an audit perspective though, I mean, if there are these particular boards that are in place, they haven't been technically disbanded, but they're not relevant anymore, should there not be some process for the government or the minister involved to either make the board active or to officially say there's no need for that board? Because it does leave us as legislators and probably you as auditors left in this limbo. You don't know whether to recommend that they should be meeting or not meeting. You know, it's hard to get a direction on that.
Sherry?
I believe, like at the time of our audit, the indication was they intended the board to meet and they were going to work on that.
So taking from that, Rob, would that be something when we send out a letter to the department that we'd want to, some information on?
Well, I guess, it really comes back to the minister has to determine whether that there's a relevancy for the board or not. We as legislators who sit on the audit, reviewing the Auditor General's recommendations are kind of, I don't know, should they be meeting or should they not be meeting? So, the auditor does their job by stating that they're not meeting, the board has not been disbanded, but yet there's no people in the, updated as far as to engage people or whatever the process for appointment would be. So I guess that's, so how do you get that sense of advisory committee to a department on an accessibility support program when there is no board there to meet and there's no, it's just left in cyberspace or something, So that's where I think we have to have a recommendation that specifies either make the board active or disband the board.
Okay.
Is it fair? I mean, if everybody else, what their feelings are.
Yeah, and that's just, Carla?
Yeah, I agree 100%, and I think through some of our other work, we did identify that this committee was really important. So I think that's a really good point in many of them. Just in this case, I know we did identify that it was important that they meet, but really something to consider moving forward. Yeah.
Rob?
So, well, obviously, if it was set up to be an advisory board, there needs to be something to advise. It's pretty hard for us to be the advisory board. We are the overseer, right? So either you don't need advice or you do need advice. It's fine. Just pick which one it is, and then we, as legislators, can analyze and critique whatever the process is. But I think it ultimately boils down to the minister taking that responsibility, saying you do or you don't, and implementing the process in place to do either.
Okay, and Sid?
Thank you, Chair. I couldn't agree more, and I guess I assume that's why they specifically stated in response to the recommendation that the department will identify regular meeting dates going forward. So that's good, and they're going to meet.
Thanks for reading.
So when I hear, one of the comments that was made was how they would be doing that at this point in time. So I guess I'll put out to the committee that as part of our follow-up on this audit, that we request that information and when those regular meeting dates going forward are. Okay, I see everybody agreeing, so that would be one of the responses that we'd want to have back from the department clerk. Any other questions on that one? Okay, so recommendation 2.28, the Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure that program policies are finalized and formally approved prior to implementation. The timeline on this one was for May 2020. So that was their workflow document, and then we'll receive the remaining 3 draft policies and submit them for final approval by April 2020. So how would the committee like to see this one proceed? Would this just be a request and update from the department? Yeah, okay. So the committee agrees that we'd want an update on that recommendation. Recommendation 2.39, the Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure that the computer application is updated for the Accessibility Supports Program. The management response, the department has updated ISM, and the new Accessibility Supports service is operational, and the timeline for the completion of that is February 10th. So I'm assuming we'd want an update to ensure that that has gone live. Any other comments?
Just a question, Chair.
Carla?
Do they, would this be something that they would evaluate? Like would they, on effectiveness?
Sherry?
Yes, I think even maybe unofficially, like as they're working through and issuing payments, they'll notice if it's working as intended. It was, I should say, throughout the whole audit, they had been planning this rollout, but it didn't come into effect till just after our report, but it had been planned for quite a long time. It's just a pretty significant project for them to change that. So, yeah, I'm not sure if like a formal assessment is planned, but they will definitely identify issues if things aren't working right.
Okay, any other questions? Corey? No? Sid?
Thank you. Just going back to that council again, I just looked it up and it appears as though the council member's term ends May 23rd, 2020. So that, just to add into that, like, has there been any turnover on, or are they just ongoing as well? That 3-year term looks like it was up May 23rd during the COVID stuff. So just in addition to that request, let's ask, if there's Marcia Carroll, Reed Burke, Judy Hennis, there's a whole list of names, just to see if there has been any changeover or if they've just gone status quo.
And so would that be a request to engage PEI to see if that process has happened again? I think? Or go directly to the board?
I think just to the Ministry
Sid?
Department.
Just to the department?
It's still an executive council decision to appoint those people or renew them,
Okay.
whatever the option. So it really goes back to what I said before. It's the minister that has to decide is the board relevant or not, and implement the processes to make it relevant if it is, or if it's not, to disband it and make that official that it doesn't exist. And I believe the minister should have that authority, right, to do so. Just do one or the other.
Okay, so in addition to the meeting schedules, we wanted to know if there's any changes to that advisory council. Okay. For recommendation 2.4, the Department of Social Development and Housing, sorry, I got distracted, should ensure, sorry, I'm going to start again. The Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure assured income supports are provided in accordance with the rates approved by Executive Council, and the management response was approved rates will now be updated through the new AAS service on ISM, and that is complete as of February 10th. I would assume that is with the implementation of the software, so that was an IT update. Does anybody have any comments on that? Okay, so same follow-up just to ensure that the implementation of the software has happened.
I
Corey?
think, but it doesn't say it's completed. So we're just sending a letter to ask them to tell us it's completed again?
Yeah. Oh, timeline for completion, I guess.
But like there's
So-
some of them that say completed. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're saying it is completed.
yeah, and there are some that aren't, but,
okay.
yeah.
Recommendation 2.41, the Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure that client contributions are properly calculated and applied for the accessibility supports program. And again, the client contributions are now calculated automatically through ISM, and that was completed on February 10th. Any further action? We're good. Okay. Recommendation 2.45, the Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure all individuals receiving benefits from the Accessibility Supports Program are assessed using Accessibility Supports Program policies. The department will develop a work plan with established timelines to ensure all assessments are completed using AAS policies, and the timeline for that is December 2020. What would you like the follow-up to be?
We don't
Rob?
know whether it's done or not at this point, so
Yeah.
we hope to get an update to say that it is complete. That's 7 months ago.
Yeah. Okay, so we're looking for an update on 2.45,
December
Oh,
2020.
December 2020, yeah.
2020, yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, Chair,
Yes,
maybe
Corey?
like the ones that are, a lot of them look like December 2020, like, maybe we could just give the department the 6 months and follow up in this next spring or something.
Okay, so for any of the recommendations that are completion timeline, December 2020, do we want to request the work plan or the action plan, and then follow up on it afterwards?
I think the only thing I'd say is, I mean, yes, sorry if I say the December 2020, I was thinking 2019 there a bit, but yeah, you got to give the department some time to do that. But, has anything changed because of COVID that is going to push those dates back would be So there would be some reason for an update only because of that.
That's a fair question, fair observation. Okay. So I'll just read the other ones. Recommendation 2.45, I read that? My goodness. Okay, recommendation 2.57. The Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure that collaborative support plans are monitored and updated. The department will develop a work plan to ensure collaborative support plans are monitored and updated. Further, staff education will be completed and compliance will be measured through the internal audit process and quality improvement measures. Again, it's December 2020 is the completion timeline. Recommendation 2.63, I'll just read through the ones that are December 2020 and then we can talk. The Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure that non-funded supports are considered and documented for recipients of the Accessibility Supports Program. Management response, the department will develop a work plan to educate staff and improve documentation practices demonstrating that non-funded supports are considered. And then a recommendation 266. In accordance with policy, the Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure that documentation is obtained for all payments provided under the Accessibility Supports Program. And the department's response, the department will ensure that documentation is obtained for all payments approved under the AAS program. Further staff education will be completed and compliance will be measured through the internal audit process and quality improvement measures. So those were all of the recommendations with a due date of December 2020. So for those, do we just want to request an update?
I think only
Rob?
because of the situation we find ourselves in. It may mean that they have to realistically push that back. It'll be, once again, helpful to know that up front. And the other side, maybe there is no reason to push it back. Maybe they're right on schedule.
And the internal...
Gord?
The internal audits, do you have any communications with their internal auditor, or is that something? No. So, and then it would be nice to get an update, because that's although they say they're doing it, I'd like to see, those are some, 257 and 266 are pretty important, that the process is changing and being improved because of this audit. So, yeah.
Okay, any other comments? I will ask, is there any concern that any of the clients are not receiving services or are being impacted by the timeline to implement these policies?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay, all right, thank you. So we'll just request then, I think that everybody's agreeing that we'll just request the update on where they currently stand. Okay. This one, recommendation 2.7, the Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure funded supports are authorized in accordance with program policies. And the response, the department will ensure exceptions to funding supports are authorized as defined in legislation, regulations, and department policy, and the due date on that is July 2020, so this month. What would the committee like to do in that one? Ask for an update as well? Okay, so clerk will ask for an update on that one. The recommendation 2.74, the Department of Social Development and Housing should ensure that assured income rates are approved by Executive Council. And the response, the department will ensure changes to assured income rates are approved by Executive Council prior to the implementation, and this is ongoing. And then the final recommendation, 2.83, the Department of Social Development and Housing should establish a process to log, monitor, and respond to inquiries received under the Accessibility Supports Program. And the management response, the department will investigate the development of a process log, monitor and respond to inquiries received under the AAS program, and that is for December 2020. So any comments or questions? Gord?
Just on 274, ongoing, is that because there's rate changes annually? Yeah, so, but that should be, that could be a meeting at executive council. Is that what they're saying, is like that at executive council, they approve the rates for the upcoming year?
Sure. That's, yes. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, so I think those were the two chapters that we had planned to go through today. And so that brings us to the end. Any committee members have any questions or comments that they'd like? No? So I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you very much for taking our questions. We are going to take, I forgot to take a break, sorry. We're going to take a short recess as we just wrap up this section of the agenda. Thank you very much for coming.
Before we go,
Sure, Darren?
The IT component,
Yes.
that's not next week, well, it was for next week. So within the annual report, there's only a couple of recommendations within the report itself, but there's a very detailed report associated to IT, but
Okay.
because of the sensitivity of what's within that report, I'm not sure how we want to address that here. So that might be something that maybe we can consider over the next week or so, is how to deal with that.
Okay, so you mean the content of the report that you'd like to review with the committee is sensitive?
Exactly.
Okay, so one of the options, and I will ask for the committee's response on that, we can do the recommendations section publicly like this, but to actually review the report in detail, we could do that in camera. So I would just put that, that thought out to the committee to see if everybody's okay with going in camera to review that specific report on IT. Okay, anyone have any issue?
What's,
Corey?
I get, I know we're the Public Accounts Committee though, I just feel like I guess what's so secretive, or what's the worry?
Well,
Darren?
some of the recommendations would identify weaknesses in the government computer systems. So
Is it in this book?
It is. So, and just to,
Public?
yeah, and just to clarify, it's only the recommendations that would be public. The details behind that would be the sensitive part that would expose where our sensitivities are, that we wouldn't want to make that public. Okay.
That makes sense.
Is that, but in this section, the two recommendations are in here, correct?
yes, yeah, and those are, that's great. The details, you probably want to not.
Just one sec. What page, what chapter is the?
29.
Okay, so it's the chapter 3, page 29 would have the recommendations. We would review those in public, and then anything that has sensitive details around it would be in camera. Okay? So is everybody in agreement with that? Okay, thank you, Chair. So we'll review the recommendations in public, but then have an in-camera meeting with the Office of the AG in order to review the details. Thank you for bringing that up,
Okay.
Darren. Okay, so thank you very much, and we will see you next week. Are we scheduled next week, Clerk? Can
We're
you-
not yet, but if it works for the committee, and I understand it works for the Auditor General's office, it'll be just next Tuesday at 9:30.
Okay, is that acceptable for everybody? Okay, so we'll reconvene next Tuesday. All right, we'll take a quick recess. Thank you. All right, we're going to reconvene for the final parts of our agenda. So next on our agenda, we have review of correspondence. So I believe the correspondence was already shared with the members via email. So there was a letter from Bethany McLeod on recommendations of the implementation of the recommendations on early learning and childcare centers. There was a letter on June 19th from Darren Noonan, the AG. And then a letter on June 19th, again from Bethany McLeod, to request, regarding our request for an update on the implementation of the Auditor General's 2019 report, which came out of our February 11th. Does anybody have any comments or questions about the correspondence? If anything arises, we can always bring it up in another meeting as well. Did anyone receive any correspondence that they'd like to bring to the committee's attention? Okay, so review of scheduling. You would have received a handout on our updated work plan. So we do have the AG for the next 2 weeks coming in to finish off the Auditor General 2020 report. And then other matters, we had left immigration, the IIDI overview of operations, the overview of property tax and assessment system and corporate taxation and tax credits. And we were going to leave that up to scheduling. I'll let you give us an update on that, Clerk. All right.
I think the committee's decision at the last meeting was to prioritize the 2020 AG report and then the 2018 performance audits, and then proceed with the other matters sometime after that.
Okay.
So they're not specifically scheduled at the moment.
Okay, and is that, have letters or anything gone out prior to this to schedule, like before we broke for COVID-19? We had sent letters out to them to meet?
Yes, to both IIDI and Finance. We actually had meeting dates scheduled for
Okay.
their appearances, but then the pandemic
Yeah,
necessitated the cancellation of those. So they're aware and they're just waiting for rescheduling, essentially, as far as I know.
okay. Do we want to start rescheduling those? Sure. Like for September timeframe, is that, I think everybody's in agreement with that? Okay.
Okay.
All right, anybody have any questions or concerns about the schedule as it stands, or no?
I don't think
Rob?
it might be September's, like I said, was planning on taking a few weeks off in September, then go visit my daughter if we can go. Don't know
Yeah.
that at this point, so I wouldn't say change anything, but I just
Okay.
thought find a replacement.
Okay,
It's not your problem, it's just identifying it as a potential issue for me.
all right, thank you. Okay, so the next on the agenda is new business. Does anybody have any? Gord?
Yeah, Chair. I was thinking that in the legislature there was a motion about fiscal updates that was voted on unanimously, and I was thinking about making a motion today to have this committee be the recipient of that fiscal update for September. So maybe I'll just read the motion and then we can discuss it. So, the House unanimously endorsed a resolution calling for an economic and fiscal update in September. I move that we send a letter to the Minister of Finance seeking a time frame and ask her to present that update to this committee as soon as it is complete. So,
Okay, anybody have any comments on that? Sorry, Ryan?
Yeah, we'd have to look at the terms of the motion that was approved by the House, if it specifies that the House is to receive that update. I'm not sure the committee could decide that the committee should receive the update in place of the House.
Okay,
I
And so
have- I
what
don't
would
have
the
the
next-
motion right here in front of me.
Gord?
motion, and it says, therefore be resolved that the government agreed to commit an economic and fiscal update in September 2020 and every September following. So that is it doesn't state, so.
Okay, can we can we give you a copy of the motion, or did you want to review the motion and then provide guidance on it, or how would you like to do that, clerk?
I might suggest one way to do it would be to just have that motion tabled for the moment and review it. And then, since the committee has another meeting next week, discuss it further at that point.
Okay.
That'd be my suggestion. It's up to the committee. I'm not sure that that would be within the committee's authority to make that decision for something that the House has asked for.
Okay. And the other thing I would just say is, like when there is a fiscal update, and this would be interesting for the committee to consider any fiscal updates that we actually do review it, and just out of public accounts. So it is fiscal accountability of the province. It would fit within our mandate, and it would be a publicly released report. Does the committee have any issue with, whenever there is a fiscal update released, that the committee actually reviews? Rob?
Well, I think we do need to, as a public accounts committee, that's somewhat our role. If I look at the same scenario where, we're in different times, and I think, I guess there's numbers have debated in the legislature about the accuracy of the budget, and it's hard to predict, is it? Who would really know? So I think, the House unanimously supported a September update, so in light of that we're not contravening the motion, it would seem like this would be a committee that we should get some sense of update on to see how accurate the projections tend to be. And if we're saying September, we should get a better sense by then of where this is going economically. I know from my own perspective, I was talking to an organization that runs a business in my riding. In the month of June, they took in $53,000 in 2019. This year, they took in $11,000. Like, that's a massive drop in the revenue, and no real end in sight. So they're fortunate that they get supports from wage subsidies and things of that nature to keep their operation going, but they're not going to take in the revenues anywhere near that they thought, which hence that they don't have the operating expenses to support the things that they do, right? So I'm just saying, I don't know if anybody predicted it to be in that situation. Now, I'm sure that I've talked to some businesses that their numbers are actually up a bit. So it's a bit of a mix, but I think there's a lot more that are down a lot that are up a bit. I guess this would be my description of that. So that's why I would think we should be the group to at least get a pre-update on things before it goes to the legislature. Hence, the legislature's not in session in September, so.
Okay. Any other thoughts from anybody?
Sorry,
Yep, Sydney?
did your motion say it has to come here first?
No, it just says, I move that we send a letter to the minister seeking a time frame and ask her to present that update to this committee as soon as it's completed. So it's, when they get it completed in September, that they present to this committee and we're able to look at that document.
Sid?
I have no problem inviting the ministry in once it's ready. I know there was extreme concern expressed with the timeline from Gordon, even when we were talking about it during estimates or during other time in this year, but they're pretty pressed at having to create two budgets and all that. But I mean, ideally, as he said earlier, the better they want that. And I don't know, open September for this year, but I have no problem inviting the ministry in. I'm weary of demanding that they would have to show it here before any result. I don't know how that works, kind of thing.
I think Corey?
Can we just invite them in, like we do anyone
that's
else?
what I would do.
Yeah.
Like, without needing your motion, Gord, like if there's an issue around the motion, we can just invite them to come and present.
Yeah. Rob?
I guess from mine, all we're asking for is a fiscal update. We're not asking for a budget.
That's right.
It's just and I would almost guess that the department is tracking their numbers monthly anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I guess what I was trying to argue my point was the fact that numbers are kind of all over the map, and if you did have something from September and early October, then that gives you at least a little bit of a sense of where things are at previous to the House sitting in November. And so that's the fiscal update. It's just a projection to guess, but at least they would have a number of months under their belt to kind of get a sense where things are going. And more specifically, because we are in uncertain times at the moment to kind of get it figured out. And I can't even predict in my writing, but I'm thinking it's going to be worse than I might have thought.
Any other? I'll just throw my 2 cents in. I think it's just good fiscal accountability to review it. And it doesn't even have to be every September. I think pretty much any time the Department of Finance comes out with some sort of fiscal update, it would be good governance if this committee agreed to review it, given that it's a public document anyway, and we're not asking them to do anything special, but to, like Corey said, have them come in and review it. I think that is just really good governance, and I would be completely in agreement with it, yeah. Everybody else? So I think what we'll do is on any future work plan, I think we've just agreed that in addition to a public accounts and the Auditor General, that anytime a fiscal update comes out, then we would ask, and I don't necessarily think it'd have to be the minister, probably the like whoever is in Gordon McFadden's, what's that?
Do we have to deal with Gord's motion first?
Yeah, there's a motion on the floor, so.
So did you make a motion that
Yeah.
we do that, or are we just reviewing your motion?
No,
Oh, you
I-
made a motion.
I made a
I'm
motion,
sorry,
yeah.
Gord.
So,
I thought you were reviewing the previous.
No, I think it's important now that we send a message that this is important for September.
Okay.
So I think that this motion,
We're asking for a fiscal update.
So
Forewarning.
well,
could you reread your motion, and do you
Sure.
have copies for everybody?
Yeah, I have one copy.
Okay, so we'll reread the motion. Okay, just 1 second. So we'll reread the motion, and then Gord's got copies that we'll hand out to the committee members.
the House unanimously endorsed a resolution calling for an economic and fiscal update in September. I move that we send a letter to the minister seeking a timeframe and ask her to present that update to this committee as soon as it is complete. And that's referring to motion number 81 in the Legislative Assembly.
Okay. And can we distribute the copies?
Yeah.
Are we?
Geez, you came prepared, eh?
You guys want step one?
Oh, you just have the one,
I don't
okay.
need copies.
All right.
Chair? Chair?
Does anybody?
Do we need copies?
No, okay.
I don't think so.
Nobody else needs? Okay. And so we have a motion on the floor. Does anybody have any, specific to the motion on the floor, does anybody have any comments? Okay, so we'll take a vote on, go ahead, clerk.
Just the other thing, just to clarify, the committee does not normally hear from ministers as witnesses, but in this case, the committee is okay with that? That'd be just my one question for clarification.
So,
I don't have a problem with the minister or deputy.
Rob?
I don't have a problem with the minister or deputy. It's just, we're just looking for a fiscal update to take an idea that the projections are accurate.
Yeah, so I'm just going to make a comment on that. When we went through training, it was, one of the directions was, it was good policy to hear from the deputies, because they run the departments and they can speak more so to the work plan and the reasons behind it. So to get well-structured, formulated answers to our questions would, the direction from the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation was that we would review that with the actual people that work within the department. So given that, I know the motion's on the floor, but can we talk about it not necessarily being the minister, but actually being the deputy minister?
Yeah, and I think the motion states that we're just sending the letter to the minister, so, but so.
Okay.
We could definitely add the deputy minister or some relevant source from the department.
I'm just asking because the motion says, and ask her, referring to the minister, to present that update to this committee as soon as it is complete.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody, that would just be my recommendation, is that as a principle of public accounts, there's nothing stopping us from doing it, but typically we don't have the minister come in. It is actually, and that's more to remain nonpartisan, so we're actually talking to the members of the public service rather than talking like with somebody who's partisan, right? So that would be the reason behind that. And I'd welcome any comments on that, or if you would have any objection that maybe we amend your motion to that point.
Yeah, I think an amendment to that point would be
Okay,
fine, yeah.
all right. So am I allowed to put, I don't know if I'm allowed, I'm not allowed to put forward anything,
Yeah.
but and
on the-
Corey can't either? Or can you, as the vice chair? Okay, so go ahead. Corey?
Move an amendment to send a letter to the minister, asking representatives from her department appear before the committee. Is that?
That good? Everybody in favor of that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Shall the motion carry?
Carried.
Perfect. As amended. Thank you. I need a rule book. That was our first motion in this committee. Okay, any other, Rob?
I have just something else I want to somewhat bring up, and I guess it comes back to the timelines from the legislature to the processes that we've involved. So we started out with a response to a COVID statement, to which we had numbers, to which we got about halfway to 3/4 of the way through. Then we've gone into a kind of more of a regular sitting of the legislature where we've had a budget. From my perspective, I don't know, as a member of the third party, whether we're going to complete this response to the COVID statement or not. And I go back to my same issues that I said previously on the previous motion, is that, I'm concerned that the numbers that they were using and the projections that they're using may not be all that accurate, and they're changing fairly rapidly. So I'm still of the same opinion that I'd like to get more of a discussion with the department about the response to the COVID situation. So once again, I'd be looking at if people are somewhat of the same opinion of that. I also have a motion here too that states somewhat of the same nature. The finance minister was presenting a COVID update to the House for reasons that were never explained. The discussion ended abruptly. And I move that we ask either the minister or the deputy to come to this committee to complete the discussion on that particular document.
Okay.
Now, maybe government's going to say we are going back to that at some point, but it doesn't look like that from my end, I guess.
So I can,
God knows how long we're going to be here, but.
I'll just say, and that was a question that I had asked, I think it was on Friday, but there is a section in the Department of Finance that has all the specific spending for COVID that we haven't actually gotten to yet. That's under the Department of Finance. And so I would think that that's where that conversation can continue. I'm open to what everybody else in the committee has to say, but it is in the estimates. We just haven't reached it yet. So I'll open the floor. Sid?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, it's my understanding that, it would come back. The context of the whole thing is we have to realize that it's an unofficial document that is down as a motion. That doesn't have any procedural method, anything. Basically, it was an agreement between the Premier and the other two leaders of the parties. It was a request, can we see the COVID spending? And they agreed to somehow make it work procedurally with here. It's certainly out of the ordinary, but it was quite, I think, pretty, giving and kind of the Premier to do that. And you're right, it was taking a long time to debate, and the focus then shifted to the provincial budget once it was ready. Again, under discussion from the leaders. So, as Michelle pointed out, she had asked us last week that all that spending is actually in the line or in the department as well. So, the chance for debate is there as well. And I know that if for whatever reason, like that's where it actually is, not versus this created method of putting a motion forward to debate it. This is the actual debating of the funding. So, for some reason, if that wouldn't satisfy. Sure, you can go back to that same document to keep going. So there's absolutely an intention to bring both, and the Minister of Finance will be on the floor maybe this week sometime with her budget, or maybe next week, I don't know. And it can be debated there, and it can also be debated that motion to come back as well. So I think
Right.
that's a discussion. for
Yeah.
sure.
Thanks, Sid. Rob?
Yeah, no, and I guess from my perspective, it's hard for me to know that that's what's going to come forward. And so, but I mean, once again, I guess the other reality is the motion is always could be there to, if we don't get that as we go through the process at in a future committee meeting, same situation could apply. Like I say, I just sort of, I'm not aware why it's sort of ended. Rule of thumb tends you kind of finish some, go on to the next step and the next step and the next step. So we kind of got halfway through something, stop, then going on to something else, and still not through that. So that's all. It's just, but I get the point that it is an anomaly the way that motion was put forward to debate it, and I appreciate the fact that it was given an opportunity for everybody to have some discussion on it. Just that at that point it hadn't concluded, and it's going to be brought up somewhere else, so that gives us that opportunity.
Yeah. Sid?
Thank you, Chair. No, you're right, and if for whatever reason it wasn't brought forward, I think, yeah, we should find out the rest of the information. Just in regards to the comment of it ending quickly, because it's a motion that doesn't have any teeth and doesn't actually do anything. I know, the discussion was in light of a pandemic, the budget was the priority to get it passed in case something happened. We needed that passed, whereas the spending document, once it's approved or, once it doesn't have any authority, so to speak. The priority was getting the budget done once it was done. So, but both will be debated.
Okay, Rob?
Yeah, and I agree. It is really like saying it's a fiscal update. It's an update pertaining to COVID, and it is an estimate. It's a best guess and things like that. Like I said, I do have the concerns that the numbers may not be all that accurate, but having said that, as long as there is the process, and we're going through that to have that opportunity, and I still have that opportunity to bring that motion forward should it not be. So, as you as House Leader have that opportunity to at least convey that message that, as legislators, we want to have that opportunity to see where that funds are being spent and that. So at least everybody's up and up in this.
Yeah.
Okay, fair.
So any other discussion on the motion?
Yeah, and I would
Gord?
I would say we don't know what's gonna happen, but this committee, when I look at this committee and the public accounts is the fiscal management, and there's been a lot of situations. It's been an interesting, difficult time over the last 4 or 5 months. I think that we have to be a little bit futuristic as we look at these things, and I think this is a good motion because I really do believe, even though the finance minister is going to talk about different things, that document was presented to us. If it doesn't get done, I think this is the committee that it should be talked about.
Anybody else have comments? So I'll share. So I often am challenged with, what comes into this committee based on what the mandate of this committee is, and I often feel like we're missing something, right? So there was a motion that came forward to request that the Auditor General look at estimate revenues prior to it going on the floor based on what Nova Scotia did. So that triggered me to think, what are we missing? Is that something that we would do? And Nova Scotia is the only jurisdiction, from my understanding, that does that. And so I did ask, what does the House Commons do? What does other jurisdictions do? And most of them have, so the House Commons has the Parliamentary Budget Office, and so revenues would go there in order for them to do an assessment, and then they would deliver a report. And other jurisdictions have a Finance Committee. And what the Finance Committee is it's more of a, I'm going to call it a partisan, similar to all the other standing committees. It's a partisan committee because it's based on estimates, and it's based on possibilities, and it's based on determining if policies are accurate. The difference with public accounts is we don't look at the merits of policy, we actually look at how government is administering the policy. So if there's something that we don't agree with that's in policy, then that's where I get challenged, whether is this the appropriate place for us to be talking about it, because it leads to partisan conversations. And so I guess one of the questions that I would have, and I know there seems to be an awful lot of committees struck and that kind of thing, but I would love to hear what this committee thinks of a finance committee that would be more of a partisan committee I know, another committee. However, it isn't on the administering of public policy. It would actually be based on the merits of public policy instead, which is it's different than what the mandate of public accounts is. And I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because I am cautious about bringing anything in that could lead to partisan conversations within PAC. So I know we have a motion on the floor, but is that okay if I add that as part of the conversation of the motion? So, Gord?
Well, I would just, looking at 95.7, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts was said committee charged with matters concerning the public accounts of the province, the annual report of the Auditor General, and fiscal management. You know, if we've focused on number 2 quite a bit in this committee, but if we look at number 1, public accounts and fiscal management, I think that, you know, this is the time that the committee needs to do that. Whether or not that boils over into another committee, I'm not too sure about that.
So just to clarify though, so public accounts is money that's already been spent. So you're actually looking at did they follow the merits of the policy, and fiscal management assuming that that's a fiscal update of money that's been spent, not a projection. And I understand what you mean. And it hasn't been our policy to bring fiscal updates into this committee, but we probably should discuss that as a committee and whether we should be doing that. Like there was a fiscal update, I believe, last September. Just leading into, actually, I think it was in March, there was a fiscal update that we didn't review. Anyway, so it's kind of food for thought on like what's the difference between those two committees, because I often get asked, like, did the finance committee review, like, is that something for the finance committee? Whenever I ask, you know, somebody from CAF or whatever, but we don't have that. It's one committee that we don't have that other jurisdictions has, which does sometimes make PAC the go-to committee for projections or discussions on should we, instead of reviewing if they met the policies that, like, in adherence with the policies that are already in place, not striking new policies. Sorry, I feel like I've talked a lot as a chair, and I'm sorry for that. It's come up a number of times, because the other thing that's come up is, so the House of Commons PAC committee has discussed whether to review their deficit and the debt, right? And what does that projection look? But, you know, and because that's money spent, like, and reviewing that. So they did say that if they ever had time on their hands, one of the top 3 priorities that they would like to put in place is looking at our debt. But because it's money that's spent, so it would reside in PAC. But the estimates, because it's based on money that hasn't been spent yet, that is the I'll call it gray area for public accounts as a public accounts committee. Anyway, I'll let the committee decide. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I'll just weigh in on, I mean, there's only 27 of us in the House here.
Yeah.
So more and more committees, I'm just getting committed out, and I'm sure Mr. Deagle's even more committed out than I am. And I think the reality is going to be winds up being mostly the same ones anyway in some of these committees. So I think because of the uniqueness of Prince Edward Island and the uniqueness of maybe our public accounts is a little bit different in some ways, that having some flexibility in interpreting financial aspects of how we're going to be impacted, whether it's future spending as projected or whether it's spending that has already been done. I think we want to have a little bit of flexibility on that. And so that's kind of my thinking anyway. I'm not hard and fast on any of it, but I'm just saying if we strike another committee, the finance committee, you're probably going to wind up with, I'll say, if there's 6 of us here, probably 4 of the 6 or 5 of the 6 will be the same ones. I'm not saying who wouldn't be or wouldn't be on here, but it's just, we're back in the same committee again, I guess. I know Corey would be there.
Sid?
Thank you, Chair. No, I get your point. A true public accounts committee is non-partisan, and unfortunately, we just passed a motion too that talks about projections, which is a partisan topic, whether you believe that it's going to be this way or not. you could look at it in the truth of it, that if you doubted a projection from the provincial government, you would see where that doubt is in which department and send that question to the appropriate standing committee that covers that area. Is, I think, technically how we would do it. You're right, 27 here, we don't have probably the resources to do a committee for every single little thing. But so if Chair, if that's the way you want your committee to stay in that way, then those requests about doubts about projections for certain departments would go to the committee that covers that department. Now we've just passed a motion for us to bring in the Deputy Minister potentially to debate projections as well, so.
Well, sorry to interrupt, a fiscal update. And a fiscal update is typically where they currently stand on their spending to that point.
Fair.
Right? So yes, a fiscal update would also have their projections, but it is discussion on where they currently stand as opposed to their budget.
And getting back to the motion, I would prefer to wait till we are done with the estimates before I would vote in favor of that motion. I think that's the place to debate that is in committee of the whole, the legislature.
Okay.
But would entertain it if for some reason we didn't get to that.
Yeah. So any other comments on the motion? I know I veered us away from it, and my apologies on that, but any other comments? Okay, so shall we take a vote on the motion? So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
For the easy
Okay. All not in favor, opposed to the motion, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, so I think that's a 3-2 vote.
Under the assumption that.
Okay.
But the motion will be brought back.
That's right. Shall it carry?
Care.
Is that right?
I'll introduce
It's defeated. The motion is
If we don't
defeated.
get to debate on this floor, I'll introduce it.
Okay, so that, we're still in new business. Anybody else have any new business that they'd like to bring forward? So the only piece, and I've already kind of discussed it a little bit, would be on debt and debt management. And I'm wondering if the committee would like to think about that as something, just put forward at a meeting that the House Commons was part of, and thought with the way the debt pretty much in all provinces is going, whether that be something that public accounts would want to at some point in time review, or ask the department kind of what the plan is, the scope of the plan. I will put that out for discussion. Okay. Sid?
Thank you, Chair. So we discussed the debt and how it's being managed each year with Blue Books and the AG.
That's true.
How do you see that being different?
I'm just going to take a quick peek at the financial. I would probably have to think about that more, to be honest, member, because I'm not sure. I know that they do review the Blue Books, and I guess to that point, one of the suggestions put forward to the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation was to do better training for members of public accounts on Blue Books and how to review them and what to look for. So I guess you're probably right. We could, even if we wanted more information when Blue Books come out, if we decide at that point in time that we want to dive into the debt more than what's been presented by the AG, we could do that. I'm completely open to that option. Gord?
I don't. What I'm thinking is, and it might be totally off base, but Chair, if the public, we talked about various different other standing committees, public accounts, and that we're not going to be looking at the debt too much. Is it possible that this committee can write a letters to the chairs of other standing committees and suggest that over the next year that they look at, when they have guests in or different departments, that those standing committees take a closer look at the debt, because we just talked about our debts versus, I look at health and social, like that, they take a lens upon looking at over the next year about the debt in different areas, rather than bringing in people here. It was just an idea. I don't know if that's ever been thought about, but that we look a little bit closer through the chairs, through yourself and the other chairs, that it's becoming an issue and we have to look at it, so, yeah.
Is it the finance department?
Sorry, what's that, Corey?
Is it the finance department that would?
Rob?
I don't think it's a case for any department. It's more of an expenditure item versus a debt item. It's the Department of Finance that administers the overall debt of the province and services that debt. So it's really more the Department of Finance that is responsible for debt. So, now there would be some crown corporations that might carry a certain debt or whatever that would be responsible under a department that would be more insignificant on that.
Yeah. And when we review public accounts, it's the comptroller that comes in who would actually be the person that would have more knowledge, I guess, as to what the trajectory looks like and what does it mean to the province to carry, that kind of debt. And, but anyway, I just was putting that forward as new business. I didn't necessarily know if it would be a topic on its own or if it would be something that we just kind of maybe think about, right, going forward. So, Sid?
Thank you, Chair. I guess response to Gord, like, is there like a bond rating that you're concerned with, or like why would you send questions about the debt to each of the standing committee chairs?
Well, we just talked about that. Rather than setting up a different committee to look at different financial stuff, like it's just an idea to have a different, to know that this is important, that public accounts is just trying to not make another committee and spread it around and have a lens. We are in, our province has an incredible substantial amount of debt, and we've just added on to that, so it's something that
Okay. So shall we table, maybe, yeah, go ahead, Sid.
So just to further on my point, perhaps, Chair, if you would go back as Chair of the committee and look to see what training or information for committee members might be available, so that when the debt section comes up for Blue Books, that we make sure that we're well prepared and ready to ask at that time.
Okay. That I can take away for, and I guess maybe even we could send a letter to Leslie Burns from the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation to even use us, I hate to say the word, but use us as guinea pigs on kind of what kind of training they would be providing or could provide in order to help us. Because I do know when the public accounts came out, we only spent about it, I think, it was certainly less time than what we spend on the AG, so I think we could probably give it more teeth, I guess, when we review it, if we have that training. So, is everybody in favor of that we will consult with CAF? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we'll send a letter out to Leslie at Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation on that. Okay, any other new business that anybody would like to bring up? All right, so I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. All right, Rob Henderson. Oh.